Let's do it. Thank you all for signing up for our Gathering of Forest talk, where we talk about the animals and the plants and all the cool things we find in our native ʻōhiʻa forests and wherever else you might find our native plants that are growing, like hopefully in your backyards. We're super excited today to welcome Neal Uno and Haylin Chock as our guests. Neal and Haylin will share about growing ley plants. My name is Kim Rogers, for those of you who don't know, and I'm an outreach specialist at Kaua'i Invasive Species Committee, a project of the Pacific Cooperative Studies Unit at the University of Hawaii Manoa. My focus at KISC is on ʻōhiʻa and our native forest ecosystems and protecting them from outside threats like rapid ʻōhiʻa death and other forest invasives. Before we invite Haylin and Neal to the spotlight, I do have just a few announcements and requests. First, if you would just drop in the chat where you're joining us from, and if you're with an organization or an agency, share that too. It's just really fun to see that kind of information on who we have that's joining these kinds of events. Also, we are recording today, and we'll send out a recording of today's talk, hopefully by the end of the week, barring any technical difficulties. And it will go up on our KISC YouTube page, where you can actually also find our very first forest talk session that was with Nori Young from Bishop Museum, and she talked about kahuli, our native land snails. So if you miss one, you can always watch them later. And if I look a little distracted, it's because I'm still letting people in. So next, check your calendars. This Saturday, I believe NTBG is giving away plants at their locations on the North Shore and the South Shore. Neal, will you remind me again what plant is being given away? And the times, perhaps, if you know, or David, jump in and you fill in.
Sure, yes, it's sugar cane. And we're giving away over six different varieties of Hawaiian sugar canes. So they're gorgeous. They range in all kinds of colors, stripes. They're super beautiful. And as Kim mentioned, you can come out Saturday, 9 to noon, either at our South Shore location in near Poipu or up at Limahuli on the North Shore in Haena and adopt a free coat. So yes, thank you.
I love it, Adopt a Co. And that is a program or a project that you guys are doing like the third Saturday of every month, right? You give away a different plant, native plant. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so this is our Grow Aloha program. And in fact, if folks are tuning in from other islands, there's adoption locations on almost every island. And so every month, if you go to, I'll type it in the chat, but if you go to growaloha.org, you can find plant adoptions near you. And we're all of us as partners are giving away different native Hawaiian plants or heritage crops like So yes, please check it out and please come out to our adoptions.
Thank you. And while you've got your calendars out, add another event, if you would, on Saturday, April 26th, which will be celebrating Ohia Lehua Day. And KISC, in partnership with the Master Gardener program at CTAR in Wailua, we will be giving away an sundry of different native plants in celebration, and that event's going to go from 9:30 to 12 noon. If you guys are on my email mailing list, I'm going to be sending out a newsletter about that either later today or tomorrow, so you'll have all the details. Um, but our next Forest Talk event is going to be Tuesday, May 6th. So that's another item for your calendar. And our featured guest will be Dr. Julia Digman from Kauai Forest Bird Recovery Project. I heard from many of you that you're interested in learning more about the state of our forest birds. And Julia has agreed to come and give a talk, much like this one, via Zoom. But then the cool part is we're going to follow that talk up with an in-person combination forest journaling workshop slash bird walk up in Kokee, where fingers crossed we will come across maybe a species or two of our native forest birds that are somewhat easier to see, that we don't have to like helicopter in. And that date is Friday, May 16th. All of these details will be coming out in a future newsletter that, again, I'm going to be sending out today or tomorrow. if you're not on my newsletter mailing list, somehow you snuck into this without that, perfectly fine. I'll drop the link into that mailing list sign up in the chat in a minute. Um, so I think that covers all of my stuff. Now let's talk lay plants. I'm going to start with my colleague Haylin Chock, who also works at Kaua'i Invasive Species Committee. She was born and raised on Kauai and graduated with her BAS, focusing on sustainable community food systems from the University of Hawaii at West Oahu. Since moving home, she has worked with various nonprofits on Kauai, such as Malama Kauai, Limahuli Garden Preserve, and Malama Hulai'ia. As a Malakala, oh, hang on, that was part of Nori.
I'm in fact not a malacologist.
You are not. That was
I'm
my
a
other
snail
one.
enthusiast.
Yeah. So what else did I miss uh
Um,
on your bio? Like,
I work at Kaua'i Invasive Species Committee and
yes.
I do outreach on everything else that is not rapid ʻōhiʻa death, which includes
Okay.
around 13 species, including little finer ant, koki, and recently coconut rhinoceros beetle. But of course, my passion project is native plants and things. And my love for native plants started as a Olapa from the age of 7-ish, and still well into my adulthood. So, yeah, that's
Thank
that.
you. Thanks for filling in for me. And that is one of the reasons why we wanted to invite Halen here and asked her to share her mana'o, her knowledge on collecting and gathering plants, either from yards or forests, for use in lay making or other practices. So let's welcome Halen to the spotlight.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just gonna share my screen real quick. Can everybody see?
I
Sound
can see.
Okay, great. So this is actually a really great pamphlet that was developed by some master's students that are part of the Natural Resource Management program at UH Manoa under Auntie Mehana Vaughn's class. So some of my friends are actually responsible for creating this resource, which is awesome. And also, I apologize if you hear large trucks in the background where I'm at the base yard today. Let's talk about growing native plants and pono gathering. So it is graduation season. It's also Merry Monarch season. That means that our forests are definitely going to be facing a lot more pressure with gathering for graduation parties, graduation ceremonies, all sorts of different celebrations that happen around this time of the year. So it's really important for us to be mindful as we go either into the forest or if we gather from other places. How are we gathering? Are we doing it responsibly? So if you folks are interested in getting this pamphlet and printing out some, I will be just shortly going through it, and I can drop that in the chat. But since this is recorded, for all of you folks who are watching in the future, this is a resource that you can look at as well. So, pono gathering. What does it mean to pono gather? First of all, of course, for those of us who do go and gather for lay for ceremonies, we know to ask permission and to say mahalo, but what are the protocols that we need to do to make sure that our forest stays healthy as well as the plants that we gather from stay healthy? Um, so, one of the things that I like to do is, of course, biosanitizing my shoes and my tools because your tools can also carry pathogens, mold, things like that as you're clipping. So an example of that would be maile harvesting. So I know maile is a highly coveted plant and it's dear to my heart. However, a lot of folks who do go to the forest don't typically go the rest of the year to take care of those plants. So I highly recommend that you let folks know in your life who do gather only once a year or so to biosanitize their tools, their shoes before and after, but also maybe encourage them to start giving back to the plants that they typically go to. So right before summertime is when everyone starts to gather, and that's going to be a very stressful time for our plants. That's one thing that I always like to point out is there an alternative? Are there alternatives to a mailele? Can we perhaps use loa'e instead? Because maybe if we don't have a relationship with the plants that we're gathering from in the forest, we have to ask ourselves, is the forest, in a good health for us to be gathering from? I know a lot of lei makers who do go regularly to their my lei plants. They water them, they prune them so that they're full and ready to be harvested. But some years, because they have a relationship with those plants, they realize it's either been a drought year or it's been really hard on the plants. So they actually choose to not gather. They just keep their maintenance with those plants. So having a relationship with places that you gather is really important as well. I also wanted to point out here on the left-hand side, it says Native Hawaiian gathering rights. So this is a really great resource for those who are Native Hawaiian to understand your gathering rights and to exercise those gathering rights. As we go down, it says use non-native materials. That's another option that we have. So using things that are already available in your yard. But also, because I work for the Invasive Species Committee, I recommend you don't use things that are seeds or that can spread invasive species. An example of that would be the octopus tree. I know a lot of people like to use that one for its beautiful lei or use it for decoration for graduations. That's actually the seeds of the Schefflera or octopus plant. So we don't recommend folks using that. Even though it's really pretty, you are inadvertently spreading seeds, especially when you put it into the green waste or you put it in your yard somewhere. There's a good chance that some of those might get lost along the way. And that is a highly invasive species on our cliff sides. Another thing, if we go down here, this is a really good informative part, and we can read that on your own time, but looking at the threats of our forests. So we have had a really dry winter, so being aware of that, making sure that we're not over harvesting that could create pockets of tinder, I guess you would say. So cutting down perhaps some trees that you were looking at or getting something at the top that would open up a pocket so that it dries out. We don't want to create that. And of course, not picking ʻōhiʻa lehua. And if you have more questions about rapid ʻōhiʻa death and the really cool scientific way that rapid ʻōhiʻa death spreads, Kim is your gal. But long story short, ʻōhiʻa is in danger because of rapid ʻōhiʻa death. So we don't recommend folks going into the forest to gather. One is because you don't know if you're spreading rapid ʻōhiʻa death, you try not to, and you also don't want to wound ʻōhiʻa. So any kind of wound could leave ʻōhiʻa trees vulnerable to rapid ʻōhiʻa death, and we want to try and preserve that as much as possible. If you are gathering from your own tree at home, that is great, but also just keep in mind that any wound can also be open for infection. So be thoughtful of that. So here are some other tips on how to be a responsible lei gatherer. And one of the best ways that you can be a responsible lei gatherer is actually starting your own lei garden. So starting to grow your own pikake, maybe getting a puakenikeni tree if that's your favorite, or even starting to get maile. Maile is going to be a long-term commitment if you want to eventually make a maile lei, but it is going to be really cool if you can say you grew it yourself. So definitely staying in touch with NTBG, even looking at DOFA, they're doing a plant giveaway at the end of the month as well, and starting your own lei garden so that it takes the pressure off of our natural resources in the forest. With that, I will be dropping this in the chat for you folks to download later. And that will segue into Neal.
Thank you, Haylin. And now let me add our next speaker to the spotlight. And remove, thank you, Haylin. Okay, but before I do, if anybody has any questions for Haylin or as we go, any questions whatsoever of Neal or of Haylin, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll either get to them right then if it's kind of contained with the topic, or at the end we've planned some time to do some Q&A. So do feel free to use that chat and make comments and or ask questions. So now I don't see any questions in the chat, so I'm going to move on to Neal, who recently gave this presentation at an event at Keoki's Paradise, and I asked if he would share his Mana'o and his presentation with us here in this format because I feel like we reach a different kind of person or just give more people an opportunity to hear from Neal. And Neal graciously accepted and said he would be more than happy to share about growing lei plants. And just as a quick bio, Neal Uno is an agroforestry technician at the National Tropical Botanical Garden. He manages the Regenerative Organic Breadfruit Agroforest. Much more easier on the tongue if you go by ROBA. Or is it ROIBA? I don't know if I even pronounced that correctly. Neal, over to you.
Wonderful. Okay, thanks, Kim. Yeah, so I'll just go ahead and start sharing my presentation. Let's see.
Do you still have a co-host? Yes, you do. Great.
Okay, great. And you can see that all good.
Yes, we can. It's even in presenter mode, so well done.
Wonderful. Yeah, so thank you, Kim, for inviting me to talk today and introducing me. I'm going to talk a little about growing lei plants. I just want to say that I am not a lei maker, or I mean, I am a hobbyist lei maker, but I'm not a cultural practitioner or specialist by any means. So the perspective I wanted to share today is more from the horticultural point of view. So I'll share some of those insights or my experience, but also insights from people in this community and their relationship to lei making and cultivating lei plants. Yeah, so move to the next slide. So, what are lei? I'm sure many of you are very familiar with lei culture, but I wanted to start with this quote from Marie McDonald, who is a seminal uh, practitioner and lei maker. So she says the lei is an expression of love, affection, honor, and respect. It is the most beautiful thing I can make from the most beautiful material at hand. As long as the lei is at its peak when I give it to you, it shows that I care. So Maria is no longer with us, unfortunately, but she has two really great books out there, Kale and Nale Makamai. They're really great books, and she took the time to kind of make an abundance of lei and photograph them and document them and talk about lei making culture. And then next to her, I just placed another photo from the state archives. This one is undated, but it's showing a lei maker. She's stringing an ilima garland, and I think it's really suggestive for the talk today because to have the access and the ability to make an ilima lei really suggests that it was cultivated in abundance and readily available to lei makers to produce lei on a daily basis to support a livelihood. So I think it's a really cool photo. You guys should check out the Hawaii State Archives. They have really cool stuff in there. Yeah, so I'm going to start with a little bit of a really short history. So again, this is another photo from the archive, Hawaii State Archives. It's undated, but it's probably early 1900s, late 1800s. And I think this photo shows well, it shows like almost every style of traditional Hawaiian lei that we can kind of think about. And there's definitely lei in there made from ferns, lei of maile, different flowers. There's haku, there's lei vili, there's the kui, the sewn lei. But yeah, I think even though it's kind of at first glance looks like kind of a humble photograph, you can really see that these people are proudly displaying lei that they have collected um, from abundant material in the landscape. And I think my mentors have shared with me that, that means that there was, or there is, a very connected relationship between the lei maker and the landscape. And to be able to have these plants in abundance means that you are out there and you're observing, and you are caring, and you are really having that connection, which is so important. Okay, so now we're gonna fast forward. This is a photo series from 2023 by a local photographer, Akasha Rabat, and she did this photo series for ID magazine. These are 2023 graduates from Kaua'i High School. And so I think there's like a nice contrast to the previous photo. It's, you definitely see different values represented in even just the material of the lei. Like there's candy and money and plastic, but there's also some really great through lines. Like you can still see fern leis, lei of my lei, and then you see some new flowers in there like puakenikeni. So yeah, a nice contrast and foil to kind of show where it's come from and where it's going. So next, this slide is just shows a nice pamphlet from Honolulu City and County Parks and Recreation. They just kind of go over the 6 sort of most recognized styles of Hawaiian lei. And this photo on the left shows someone receiving a beautiful haku lei. Yeah. So over time, lei making as a tradition definitely emerged from a Polynesian precedent. Um, the ancestor or Native Hawaiians who came through via canoes to Hawaii, um, they brought this tradition from other parts of Polynesia. There's deep traditions using tea leaf, maile, and ulu in lei making practices. And as the art form developed in Hawaii, you can see incorporation of the really iconic Hawaiian plants used in lei, like ilima and mokihana and maile, which is a native plant too. And then we come into contemporary time period, and you have more recent introductions such as puakenikeni, Pua melia or plumeria, Pakalana, and Pikake. All plants that are really prized for their fragrance. So just a very brief overview of lei history. So I'll quickly go through some of the plants. So this is tea leaf. I wanted to highlight this wonderful artist. Her name is Erica Taniguchi, and she actually did this photo series for a story for NTVG talking about her and her family's connection to tea leaf. Of course, it's more than just a lei plant. It is, used for food, medicine, even fiber. You can make raincoat out of it. But so she speaks really beautifully to her experience and her deep connection to the plant. But yeah, I think this is also a really foundational plant to any garden in Hawaii. It has, so many uses, so much beauty, and yeah, tea leaf. So moving through the sort of Polynesian introductions. We also have ulu. So ulu, that's the primary plant that I work with in the agroforest. Our agroforest here at NTVG, ROBA, as Kim mentioned. It's the dominant canopy is breadfruit. And here I just wanted to kind of show the progression of the leaf sheaths, which are the most commonly used material for breadfruit lei. And so you can see it appears on the tree. Basically, every part of the breadfruit tree comes out of a leaf sheath, which I think is pretty cool. So whether that's the male flower, the fruit, or a new leaf, it all comes out of this leaf sheath material that then to the middle photograph, it falls to the ground where it begins to sort of cure and dry, and it turns this beautiful golden color, which at this point is collected, and then finally the rightmost photograph, it is twisted very similarly to tea lei into a twisted lei Healy kind of product, and it lasts a long time. So it's a beautiful, beautiful lei. Okay, I think this is a nice bridging plant. So Miley is indigenous to Hawaii and other parts of the Pacific, like Cook Islands. And my understanding is that it is Miley lei are considered a very ancient lei, and it connects the people of Hawaii to the other parts of Polynesia in this tradition. On the left is it's a photograph from Marie McDonald's work from the book Calais. So it shows a nice example of a Miley lei. And then in the middle, you have apparel designed by artist from North Shore of Kauai. His name is Rocket Ahuna. And so I thought this was a nice sort of contemporary intervention on Miley, and he's used it here as a t-shirt, and it's a nice interpretation, I think, of Miley lei. And on the final photograph is a potted plant of Miley, and that's another thing I really want to emphasize today is that it is possible to cultivate your own lei plants, even my lei. It can be done in a cultivated setting. And it's, for the most part, it's going to be more convenient for you as someone who's making lei to be able to harvest if you're cultivating your own plants. And I think it just makes a richer and deeper connection to that plant. Okay, so Miley is the bridge to some native plants. I just want to highlight. So ilima lei, that is another really important lei plant. It's a native plant. It grows from the seashore. There's also ones that grow up Mauka. But yeah, it's a really special plant, and we have Kumuhula Mapuana de Silva in the middle with some really nice ilima lei going on. I thought it was interesting because it is kind of challenging to find more recent photographs of people with ilima lei, and in talking to lei makers, a lot of times when you ask them about ilima lei, I think as a result of sort of the times we live in, and so how ilima lei is such a huge time commitment, you just don't see people producing them as much, and if they do, it's for a like super special occasion, because I'm sure, as many of you know, each strand is hundreds, it could be up to 1,000 blossoms in one strand. So that, with the gathering and the sewing, and it's a very delicate flower, it's a very time consuming endeavor. So yeah. Okay, now moving on to some more recent introductions to what we broadly think of as lei plants, special or important lei plants. Here is pikake. I believe it comes from Asia. It's China, the Indian subcontinent, that area, but it's really valued for its fragrance. And I think this photograph of the pikake with the Miley is really nice. It kind of shows an incorporation of traditional materials with more recent introductions, such as pikake. Moving on, another very fragrant and popular lei plant is pakalana. This one, I believe, was introduced from Southeast Asia, sort of native to Malaysia area, where I think it's actually also a food plant. But yeah, another beautiful plant that's very fragrant. Yeah, and very common to see in lei making practices today in Hawaii. And of course, you have puakenikeni. This plant is another very fragrant plant, very fragrant flower. It has a pretty hardy flower to make lei out of. They last a little longer than, say, I don't know, ilima lei, for example, that lasts a couple hours. This one can last a whole day, and also very easy to cultivate. Just a couple more. Plumeria, also important lei plant. And just highlighting here the many different sort of cultivars or types of plumeria. Yeah, all shapes and forms, and a lot of them, or for the most part, there are many plumeria types that were developed in Hawaii for specifically for the lei industry. So, and yeah, a really cool special lei plant. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about cultivating lei plants. So I'm going to mainly focus on vegetative propagation. It works really well for a lot of the plants that I just went over. Yeah, so we'll go through some of these methods. So we have cuttings. That's fairly simple. I found a nice illustration of how cuttings can be taken. So, you can do a pretty basic approach, like with, say, with tea leaf. That plant you can literally take a stem cutting from the mother plant and then place it in the soil, and you will likely get a rooted plant very easily. There's not much you have to do. The succulent stem will keep the water in and it will root out and you'll have a new plant in no time. But of course, as this illustration is kind of showing, you can do a more involved approach, like taking stem cuttings, removing the flowers, removing some of the leaves, putting it in a sterile media, like, say, perlite or peat moss, putting it in the shade and watering it for a few months, and then you can get new plants from stem cuttings. And that can work, not just with tea plants, but it can work with pikake, pakalana that's a really easy way to do it is with stem cuttings. Yeah, so lots of options with cuttings. Then we can move on to air layering. So this one is a little more complicated. It is technically vegetative propagation. So this is a nice illustration I found online where you're going to girdle the stem, remove the outer bark and inner bark from the branch and scrape down to the wood. You're going to apply a rooting hormone to the growing portion of the branch, usually it's the top, just around the edge. And then again, you're going to apply a media like sphagnum moss or potting soil, nice and damp to promote the root growth. And then it's going to be wrapped in plastic and then wrapped in aluminum foil to keep the light out and help roots grow. This process, usually it's like cuttings 2 to 3 months before you start seeing a rooted stem or branch. This works well with plants like puakenikeni. It's recommended to do air layering with that one. And typically, like woody plants, you can have great success with air layering. The next one is layering. This is a very simple method. This is typically seen with plants like bukake, where you will just take a growing stem of the plant and you'll anchor it into nearby soil and keep cultivating and taking care of the plant, and it will produce a rooted shoot pretty readily, like a few months in. And then you can dig it up and move it to a new place and have a new plant. So that's layering. It's very simple. And then I also had division on my list. This is great for anything that grows in a rhizome. So anything that sends out a long runner through the ground. Think of plants like ferns, kupu-kupu, or palapalai. These plants will send a runner through the ground that then, little plantlets come up out of. And then with division, you can just take a nice sharp bladed tool like a knife and cut through the rhizome and separate it from the mother plant, and then plant it in a new place, and you can reproduce the plant that way. Oh, and I guess I also had seeds in there. Seeds is a pretty straightforward method. You collect seeds from the desired plant, say like ilima, which is a great uh, prolific producer of seeds. And then you can sow those seeds in, again, like a nice potting media, and water them in. And in a few months, you'll have little ilima plantlets coming up. So lots of different great methods to cultivate plants. So next I'm going to move on to actually creating and implementing your lei garden. The photograph here, this is the photograph of ROBA from the sky. So I just wanted to highlight here sort of the design and implementation considerations in a lei garden. So, you're going to want to think about initial things like how much space do you have? Is it going to be a couple of potted plants on a lanai? Is it a small backyard? This area of ROBA that you're looking at, it's close to about 2 acres. Is it going to be something like a landscape? And so in all of that, no matter what size you're looking at, you want to think about pathways, access, how are you going to get to the plants and harvest them? Just really, they seem very basic steps, but it's important. And like I wanted to highlight ROBA here because it looks kind of like it's meant to appear as a naturalistic sort of forest, but it actually was very heavily planned, and a lot of consideration went into how to move through the space, how to harvest from the plants. So it's a thing to consider, as well as irrigation. How are you going to irrigate your plants? If you're doing something on a landscape scale, you're going to want to think about installing irrigation. Where is your water going to come from? Is it coming just out of a hose bib, or maybe you're just watering by hand? It it just matters how you're going to do it and how you're going to design success for yourself in something like a lei garden. Another aspect I wanted to highlight is utility. So you may think like, oh, I don't have the time or the space to dedicate to just growing lei plants. But here with the agroforest, you can think of many plants having many uses. So like tea and ulu, like they're more than just lei plants. They also provide food and fiber and medicine. So there's like a cross utility aspect you can think of in what you might consider as material to make lei out of, if that makes sense. And then another really basic first step consideration is planting enough plants to make a lei from. So like with the pakalana, for example, you might need maybe just 2 plants, And in my experience, two plants have been able to, during Pakalana season, like I can create a lei a week out of two plants. But with, I don't know, and depending on your puakenikeni tree, how many puakenikeni trees are you going to need to make the amount of leis that you want to be making? So the quantity of plants is going to determine the volume of lei that you're able to make. So as Kim mentioned, the O in ROBA stands for organic. So I'm going to really promote organic care in the garden. So when you're doing organic care, you're really going to want to understand the setting that you're putting your garden into. Not just like the exposure to light, but what part of the island are you on? How much rainfall you're going to get in a year, and thinking about the appropriateness of plants in that setting. So, if you're in Keikaha, you might want to rethink trying to start a Miley garden out there. But maybe something like plumeria will be appropriate, or ilima, which there is a beautiful variety that is kind of specific to Keikaha out there, and it grows abundantly. So yeah, thinking about your setting, thinking about your rainfall, thinking about your soil, that's going to help you have success with the plants, especially in an organic care setting. Um, as a lot of lei plants do require consistent irrigation. Again, I'll use plumeria as an example. It does do okay without very much water, but it can do also really well with consistent water. I don't think there's a plant out there that's going to say no to consistent watering, especially if you're trying to get flowers out of a plant. And flowering material. For pest management in ROBA, generally I use very, non-invasive approach, organic practices. We typically use neem oil as sort of a pest management, but it's more of a nutritive application that we do on a consistent basis. So the neem oil is helpful to prevent sucking insects from making a home on your plant, or if you do have sucking insects, the neem oil will help to diminish their presence. And in my horticultural approach, I am wanting to give the plant just more of a chance. And if you can get a significant amount of the insects that are damaging the plant off of it, you may be giving it a chance to grow more vigorously, giving it a chance to get past the pest and, live abundantly. Another intervention that's really tried and true is soapy water and a paintbrush in organic care. It does take time and effort, but if you're cultivating something like Miley and it's a precious plant, you're gonna want to sit there for the hours it takes to paint the leaves with soapy water and help that plant survive and thrive. Yeah, and in a agroforestry setting, we're also thinking about soil regeneration in the agroforest. So we're going to use low number fertilizers, and low number, I'm referring to the NPK ratio, which is like the most abundant nutrients you see in fertilizer. So it's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, NPK. So you want to use a low number, like something like a 454 or 233. We use chicken pellets. They're aged, so they have, they're not going to burn the plants, and or something like composted turkey manure. So something that's going to slowly provide nutrients and like a slow drip method to kind of gently encourage the plants to grow, give them the nutrients they need. Another practice that I really, or two practices that I really stand by are mulching and so mulching your plants with what you have on hand is going to be the absolute best. Especially with all these invasive pests moving around, like little fire ants and coconut rhinoceros beetle. These pests, they vector typically through green waste material, or they can. And so if you're going to mulch, I really recommend mulching with the plants that are already growing in your space. So if you have plants growing, you have mulch material. Um, oop, I'll go back there. So one of the methods, for example, I use is I use grass clippings and dead leaves, and I just run my lawnmower over that material and I distribute it in the planted beds, and it provides a nice mulch. It keeps moisture in the soil. It provides decomposing material for the plants to then absorb and use as nutrients. And it, going to build soil. And then, of course, complementing that would be composting. This is another really important practice in an organic setting. You're going to want to take your material. It's the most basic recipe I'm going to give to you as quickly as I can is a layer of green material like grass clippings, brown material like dead leaves, layered in a nice tightly packed mound. And then the two other ingredients are going to be air and water. So everything you want to keep moist, and then you want to have a nice airflow through your composting pile. And usually that takes a couple months for the compost to fully develop. And then you should distribute that on your plants, and it will provide nutrients for them to grow. Okay, so next, gathering as horticultural care. I think this is a really nice lens for lay makers, especially because when you're out there and you're gathering from your plants, you're also really using the power of observation to see and evaluate the health of that plant. So especially when you're gathering flowering material, it's usually the most vigorous growing point of the plant. And as that plant grows, that's what pests are attracted to. So whatever new emerging growth is coming out of your plant, that's where you're going to find pests. So I think it is really in line with lay making to be out there observing the plant, looking at it, seeing the pests, and making health assessments. And yeah, so you're going to sit there and you'll be like, should I be gathering from this plant, or do I need to be here taking care of it and doing something more? What is it telling me, you know? Of course, a lot of my mentors have told me that when you're gathering from a plant, you're helping it to encourage more flowers. And this is really true with plants like puakenikeni, for example. As the tree produces flowers, it is really in its life trying to go into fruit. But if you let it go into fruit, it's going to then shift its energy and not produce as many flowers. But if you're out there every day collecting and clipping the flowers, it prevents it from going into fruit, and it then, as a response, will typically produce more flowers. And yeah, so informed pruning and picking can rejuvenate the plants. And you're also going to be in there, like, especially with ferns, when you're harvesting fern material, you're going to want to take out all the little dead fronds in there. And that's going to also promote plant health. So I also included perspectives from people in the NTVG community and the Kauai community, and their thoughts as cultural practitioners and lay makers. And I really love what they have to say. It's really wonderful insights into lay making. So pictured here, this is Lei One. She's the director up at Limahuli Garden and Preserve. And so I'll read her quote. If you receive a lei, you're not only receiving a lei from that person, you're receiving a lei from the long genealogy of practitioners within that family. So in this quote, she's kind of referencing friends who gift her hala lei made from the hala keys. And so when she receives a lei from those people, she is reminded of their long-standing relationship with the plant and their deep connection to it. And of course, in this photo, she is creating a lei out of limu kala, and that's a very important plant to her. She's a limu practitioner, and yeah, it's a beautiful lei. Next, I chose this quote from Haley Walker. She is a horticultural assistant here at NTVG currently. And so her quote, she's saying, planting your own materials is essential to avoid putting extra stress on our forests by harvesting wild plants. And so I think here she's referencing the lei that she's made. It's from plants she has put in an agroforest. So she's got mamaki, she's got uala, she has kukui. So these are, again, this kind of utilitarian cross functional use of plants. So food plants, they can also be lei plants, and you can make a beautiful lei out of things that you might already have in your garden or agroforest. Let's see. I also chose to highlight Tapa here. He's a lei maker and a farmer. I like what he has to say. You only take what you need and leave the rest to grow. And if you are new to lei making, you should find someone to kokua or help you and teach you the right ways to gather so you're not harming the plants and there will be natives thriving for future generations. So yeah, I like what he has to say, and just thinking about how many people here on Kauai in our community, they are, really experienced lei makers all around us. And, if you're interested in cultivating or making a lei out of a specific plant, you probably know someone who has a very deep connection and would be more than willing to help you figure out how to make the dream come true with your lei dreams. Yeah, and so finally, I just I'll put these in the chat, but I collected some really great resources for people who are interested in lei making and cultivating lei plants. This first one is just a great video series on like how to do some of the vegetative propagating techniques I talked about. Please look at plantpono.org, especially if you're not sure if this is the plant the plant of your lei dreams is invasive or not. They have really great recommendations and sort of evaluations of plants, whether or not you should put it in your yard. Yeah, and then just a list of some good YouTube videos, and then some great Instagram accounts that are lei makers, Instagram accounts that are invested in plants and culture. That was very straightforward. Yeah, and some great artists who are using lei materials in new and exciting ways. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Neal. A round of Zoom applause. Thank you. Thank you. I see some lovely people sharing their appreciation and gratitude. I do have some questions. Do you have time?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. And those of you who have questions who have not entered them into the chat, feel free to do so now. Um, One of them, and if you would maybe stop sharing so we can see everybody on screen again, that would be great, or their names. Feel free to turn your video on if you want to be seen, friends. I did have a question. I'm going to ask you one, and then somebody requested that in your presentation that you go back to a slide. So at some point, I want to do that, and it was the slide that showed the different types of lei making styles.
Sure.
So think about that. Meanwhile, while you're pulling that up, a question from Billy is hi Billy, what plants grow nicely together? For example, lehua, what is a nice plant to grow beneath? Or lai, what grows nicely under, etc. Can you maybe just share a few different, like, I like to think about, growing native plants in our yards like a forest, right? So you have a canopy, an understory, and a ground cover. I'm wondering if maybe you might think like that too, or if that makes sense to think like that if you're growing plants for lei making. Obviously, ʻōhiʻa lehua would be considered a canopy tree. What might be some great partner trees, if you will, or ohana trees to go with ʻōhiʻa?
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's a great point. The agroforest as a model is typically broken up into layers. So canopy, mid-story, understory. Um, Actually, I do have one ʻōhiʻa in the agroforest surviving.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, I mean I'm sure as I've learned and spoken with you, Kim, lehua is sort of like the forest mother. And
Mhm.
so a lot of things will be really successful growing in the shade of a lehua tree. I mean, the one I have here, I'm really trying to cultivate ferns underneath it. I think that's a great companion to the lehua, because
So
it's
if
gonna,
somebody lived, which I know where Billy happens to live, so you're in, say, Wailua, Mauka. So a little bit rainy, right? What fern? I mean, kupu kupu. I mean,
yeah, start with something easy like kupu kupu, palapalai, because palapalai is really does best in a lightly shaded to full shaded area. So that would be something great under ʻōhiʻa lehua. Um, I've grown things like uki uki, the Dianella
mhm.
underneath ʻōhiʻa lehua. Yeah, a
I
lot
have
of
a I have a Kia that does really well, but I don't know if a Kia is used in lei making. So, but I know I throw that out there in my yard, and I'm like the tough love plant mother, and a Kia does great.
I've seen IKEA used in like
Have
hakule.
you?
Yeah, yeah, it's really beautiful blue-green kind of texture. Yeah.
Nice, nice. Okay, another question is, when making tea leis, is it okay to cut the entire tea plant?
If that's what you're going for, I'll give my experience. So while I'm growing the ulu or breadfruit trees, they really dislike having the understory become a mid-story underneath their canopy. So anything that touches their branches, that branch will then die back, because
Huh.
they'll make room for that neighbor. And I have a lot of tea growing with the ulu, and in order to keep it from harming the breadfruit tree, I will cut it down. I'll cut the whole stem off. It depends on what you're going for, you know. If you're just harvesting a few leaves for lei, typically what I see is people will clean the stalk, so they'll take the yellow leaves, the slightly yellow leaves, the torn leaves, and they'll get to like the nice leaves. And it's a good way to kind of clean the plant off, and promote its growth. But if you're going to cut the whole top off, then maybe you would consider taking that and putting it in a new place and creating a new tea plant. So yeah.
And just to make clear, and make sure I'm not assuming anything, if someone were to cut like the whole top off, that existing tea plant that's in the ground is pretty much, you're pretty much still guaranteed it's going to come back. It's not like it's gone, correct?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
It'll take
that's
time, but
why we
yeah,
love tea. It's pretty, yeah,
pretty.
hardy.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Now you talked about ilima and using ilima in lei making. I had some questions that came in. They're not in our chat, but they were in when people registered for our event today. Somebody wanted tips on growing ilima. Do you have suggestions?
It's full sun. It's a full sun loving plant. So planted in a sunny area. It seems like it handles a lot of different soil conditions. I used to live out in Kekaha, and the soil out there is like pretty much just sand. And it loves it. It really thrives in that kind of condition. It's kind of harsh.
And
But
the other thing I've noticed too with ilima is I think it's died off. And then it gets a nice, good rain shower or two that comes through, and all of a sudden it's like overnight back to life.
yeah. Yep.
Yep. Yeah.
That's why it's a really great candidate for stem cutting propagation.
Okay, great. Great. How about the slugs, snails, and lizards that seem to thrive? And, most of them are non-native and or invasive, right?
Yeah.
What do you suggest for discouraging them?
So the organic uh kind of procedure that I am comfortable with sharing. I use Sluggo. It's OMRI certified. It's a pellet that actually it has a chemical in it that is safe for people and pets, but it dissolves the bodies of the snails. Um, but you can only really do that in a monthly application. Um, Another way to manage snails, which you have to be really careful with because, of course, they host the rat lungworm disease in all parts of their body. So you would get gloves, and the best time to do it is at night, is because that's when they're most active. And you would go out into your yard and physically remove them
Hmm.
and try to find all of them. And you're not going to get rid of every single snail, but if you can consistently go out there and manage them, it'll make a difference for the plants.
Good point. Okay, another question that came in the chat. What kind of ley plant would also work as a hedge, potentially?
Ilima. If you
A
don't, if
lima, really?
I mean, a lot of what you find is Ilima papa, the really low growing, but there are some types that are more shrub-like. And you can get like a nice 4 foot tall shrub out of Ilima. Um,
Fascinating. Did
I
not
mean,
know that.
and then you can do like a nice layered effect. You can do Ilima, and then you can do tea leaf behind that, and you have your next wall of plants. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Okay, tips on growing hibiscus.
Uh, Hibiscus. Okay. I have a couple of those down in ROBA. They're kind of they're at the same time they're challenging, but they're also sort of like hardy and resilient in many ways. So I think when they're younger plants in the ground, like under a year old, they do require a lot of TLC,
Mhm.
like constant monitoring, especially for like sucking insect pests. Um, and you can apply neem to hibiscus, but especially with like natives, you want to be careful of the timing because there's a photosensitivity that the neem causes in the leaves. So if you did it like midday, you could burn your entire plant, which would be traumatic for everyone. So you want to either do it very early in the morning, like right at sunrise, or late in the afternoon. And then you want to again do it on a really consistent basis because what how the neem works is it prevents it kind of kills them off slowly over generations. So it's
Okay. So when you say sucking plants or sucking pests, can you name two or three or four of those? What's that category?
so like mealybugs,
Okay.
aphid, uh, white flies, scale, yeah.
Gale. Okay. Yeah, I have scales that I have a problem on my native hibiscus. So thank you for that. Um, so I have another question, and I love it because it's like a neighbor of mine. Um, we have 10 acres in Anahola and want as many native plants as possible. What would you recommend?
Uh, for that setting.
I think so, yes.
Okay. Well, Anahola, you're a little more north, so you're getting more rainfall. I mean, that area is famously the home of hibiscus clayi. If you can buy it at a plant sale, like that would do really well there.
And just to quickly interrupt you on that one, that particular variety, Hibiscus clayi, I did buy a few years back at the DOFA native plant sale, which they're having one this April 22nd on Earth Day. And the seeds actually came. I literally was putting this plant in the ground, and I live in front of Kalalea. And I happened to look at the tag and it told me its provenance, where the seeds came from, and it was Kalalea. And I had a lovely moment where I was like, "You're home." And they're still surviving. Yeah. So anyway, hibiscus, what else?
I believe that area was typically known for like a mixed forest of ʻōhiʻa and hala and Kaua'i. Um, the story of Erica Taniguchi that NTBG or she wrote for NTBG, she's actually based in Anahola, and that's where her garden is. So um, you might
Lots.
find a way to reach out to her, and yeah.
Yeah, lots of ideas there. Okay. I'll try to wrap things up here. Um, Mamaki. Somebody says, growing mamaki, my plants never survive. Do you have tips?
Uh, I've found that one challenging as well.
Ah, okay.
Uh,
Let's leave that. There is a quick question and follow-up to your neem. Do you dilute the neem?
yes, yeah. So
Like 10% solution or what?
I do a tablespoon of neem per gallon of water,
Wow.
and then I typically mix a 25-gallon batch. And then you have to also mix in a tablespoon of usually like Castile soap, some sort of
Like Dr. Bronner's.
yeah, because it helps to emulsify the oil in the water.
Okay, great. I love how we're getting down to the specifics and the nitty-gritty.
Yes,
Yeah,
less
that
and
is
less is more. Less is more
less is more. Yes.
with
Uh,
neem.
a question in the chat says hibiscus likes full sun, gentle breeze space, pruning to create bushy plants. I would not recommend planting native hibiscus with non-native, as I wouldn't want disease or insects to spread from my hybrid hibiscus to my beautiful natives. Thank you, Rhonda, for sharing that. Yeah. Okay. Neal, I lied. I do have one more question that came in the registration. And I think it's important to kind of wrap up with this one because it is a lay plant for sure. Somebody has asked, my puakenikeni has been in the ground for several years, but it's only bloomed once, just two flowers about a year and a half ago. Nothing since then. Is there anything I can encourage it to flower?
Oh, that's tough. I mean, I know if they're grown from seed, they do take a long time to produce flowers, like 4 to 5 years before you start seeing them. And then yeah, I have them down in ROBA, and I have younger trees. I think they're less than 8 years old. And even this year, there's lots of budding, but I haven't had enough to produce a lei just yet.
Mm.
So
So there's still hope for this one then, it sounds like.
yeah, just keep caring for it and encouraging branch growth and removing flowers as they show up, and it'll send out more flowers.
One last thing I'll share about ʻōhiʻa specifically is, last summer we had a really dry summer. And toward the end of the summer, I was getting calls about people who were concerned they were losing their ʻōhiʻa. And we would go out and look. And in some cases, because one of the symptoms of rapid ʻōhiʻa death, right, is the browning of the leaves. And this was happening to some ʻōhiʻa. And people were concerned their trees may have had rapid ʻōhiʻa death. And we went out and took a look, and the browning was not necessarily consistent with how trees that are infected with rapid ʻōhiʻa death, the leaves brown. And it was likely a situation, because we have run into this before in really dry summers, of drought. So I like to encourage people in the summer, like, don't forget your trees, especially if it's a super hot one. And even if your tree's been in the ground for quite a few years, they may still need to be watered. Um, so yeah, just keep remembering. I do that. I mentioned I'm the tough love plant mom. I do that with some of my trees. I'm like, "Oh, you're 20 years old. You don't need any water and it hasn't been any rain all summer, right?" So, yeah, let's just maybe remember to water our ʻōhiʻa and other plants. I loved what you said earlier, Neal, that, typically like no plant gets too upset over having a lot of water, you know. I'm sure there are some, right? But in general, plants like water. Any last thing you want to share, Neal?
That's it. If you want me to go back to that slide, I'm happy to.
That
And
would be great if you would do that, and then we'll release everybody else. And I think it was Lelaine who asked that if you want to stay and see that slide. Meanwhile, though, everybody else, don't forget if you want to join us for our plant giveaway on ʻōhiʻa Lehua Day, it's going to be Saturday, April 26th, up at the UH Research Station. I'm going to be sending out information about that today or tomorrow. And also, when you click out of this event,